FPS games used to tend towards the slow and steady style of gameplay, the kind where you wait behind cover until there's a chance to jump out and shoot. Though it looks like gamers and developers alike are bored of this style of play, because some of today's shooters are tending towards I, for one, am very happy to see this shift, because fast-paced movement shooters with loud, synthy, metally soundtracks are exactly what I like. Today, I'll be looking at two games that harken back to older shooters while simultaneously building on the mechanics both the old style and the new style have brought to the genre. These games are ULTRAKILL and Doom Eternal, and they just happen to be two of my favourite games. Let's look at what I like about these games and how they differ even though they have shared roots. Roll intro! In Doom Eternal, each gun is its own distinct entity with its own advantages and disadvantages. A combo occurs when the weapons are used in sequence, usually quite quickly with a technique known as quick swapping. At the beginning of Doom Eternal, the player has no clue what will kill what. As they progress in the game, certain combinations of weapons naturally fall into place with certain enemies. Eventually, these sequences can form into player-created combos. See this short Under the Mayo video for more about that. Additionally, different modifications on each weapon can completely change the way they are used, and how that weapon fits into a string of attacks. For example, the precision bolt modifier for the heavy cannon turns a simple machine gun into an MLG 360 quick-scoping sniper. Doom creates fun moments by allowing the player to choose how to deal with a threat in their own way. A combo of abilities in Doom is more defined by which enemies it can be used against rather than what it's made up of, like a Marauder combo or a Doom Hunter combo. In my opinion, what sets apart Doom Eternal's combat system is the way the combos each player uses grow in complexity naturally as they play the game. In ULTRAKILL, weapons are still very distinct from each other, but it's the way they can interact with themselves that define what it's like to play the game. For example, the marksman pistol. What's that? It's a coin! The coin is a clever mechanic that treads the line between ability and interactable. When fired off, the coin, which is placed into the world, spouts a tree of options ranging from simply shooting it, reflecting the shot into a nearby enemy, to punching it into an enemy, waiting for the coin to fall inside the enemy's hitbox, then shooting the inside coin with your railgun, causing bloody total internal reflection on a goddamn statue. I think you can see what I mean. What sets apart the combo mechanics of ULTRAKILL is the use of interactive abilities. The player can put something down with one weapon and choose to interact with it with a variety of other weapons. Doom seems to place an emphasis on enemies being very distinct from one another. Even among fodder enemies, there's a wide variety of attacks the demons have. For example, this soldier's shield can be blasted with the plasma rifle, a unique weakness to this type of fodder, but it can also be instantly chainsawed for ammo like the rest of the fodder enemies. This mecha zombie has a flamethrower which can deal significant damage at close range, and the stone imps from the DLC can only be killed with the auto shotgun mod or by chainsawing. This pattern continues into the heavy and super heavy demon types. The Cacodemon, Arachnotron and Dread Knight are all very distinct in their attack methods, weaknesses and movement patterns, for example. This design philosophy means that killing certain demon types will not come as easily or immediately to the player, but it reinforces the mastery type of progression that the game strives to fit under. It pairs very well with the weapon design because no two demons have exactly the same ways of killing them, and each combat feels unique and distinct. Even though ULTRAKILL has far fewer enemy types, they generally feel less distinct. Most enemies' attacks can be dodged in a similar way, but the few that do differ make for some interesting combat scenarios. Similarly, most enemies can be damaged and killed in the same way, but as previously mentioned, it's the combination of weapons' abilities that create the interesting combat. Another thing about ULTRAKILL's combat is that even the enemy's attacks can interact with the weapon's abilities and create opportunities to start off huge multi-hit, multi-kill combos. A prime example of this is the community favourite Chargeback, in which a coin is used to reflect the explosive beam of a malicious face right into its face. Another great mechanic involving enemies is the iconic parry, with which most projectiles in the game can be hurled right back at their sender, with some good timing of course. This can turn even small fights between a few enemies into an option tree of abilities that you can string into each other, one after another. In general, lore in Doom Eternal is presented in a way that's non-intrusive to the player, and pretty much only exists in the form of collectibles called codex entries, which are found throughout the game world. The entries themselves provide context for the game's setting and enemies. They expand on details of all the demons, locations, the Doomslayer, and more. These entries are completely optional, and the player could choose to never read them, but they are a nice touch for players who want to learn more about the world of Doom. There is also some environmental storytelling scattered throughout the levels, with certain set pieces allowing the player to infer about what happened there. These bits of environmental storytelling are designed well because they are enjoyable to players even if they don't want to engage with the lore. For example, this demon with a massive spear through it. Wonder what could have happened there. ULTRAKILL's lore is equally ingrained in the environments that you fight in, from the tunnels of the entrance of hell to the dark labyrinth of the pyramids of the Greed Layer. Smaller lore tidbits are written in the enemies section of the terminal, revealing more about each enemy. The most mysterious and seemingly important lore is hidden at the end of every secret level. These passages tell more about the grand schemes going on behind the scenes, and they are a good reward for the player who goes the extra mile. Though both games don't exactly take themselves seriously 100% of the time, ULTRAKILL definitely wants to say something with its lore beyond just being there to look cool, but we won't be sure about what it's saying until the game's fully released. Most of Doom Eternal's boss fights leave a lot to be desired. I think the main issue with them is that they feel very out of place in the game. They are these huge set pieces where the player is supposed to feel like they're in this grand, epic battle, but the reality is that the player is just shooting at a big enemy until it dies. The prime example of this is the game's final boss, the Icon of Sin. The Icon of Sin attempts to play into Doom's forte, that being multi-enemy arena battles, but the core part of the combat, taking off pieces of the Icon's armor, is very tedious and doesn't play into the gameplay loop very well. There are a couple bosses that are decent, such as the Seraphim from DLC 1, which does what the Icon of Sin was trying to do with its large arena and many enemies and one big boss that you have to occasionally focus on. The difference there is that the Seraphim is not always so easy to hit, since it's always teleporting, and during two of its phases you are let loose on two spirited up enemies, a core mechanic of the DLC, which ties the boss fight in well with the main levels. For me, ULTRAKILL's boss fights are a perfect culmination of what's learned through the gameplay in the main levels. Almost all of them are crafted in a way that pushes the player to the limits of their capabilities for that section of the game, forcing them to use all that have been given to them so far. A great example of this is the second boss of the game, V2. Without mentioning how good 1-4's build-up is, the V2 fight is a perfect difficulty for a player at that stage in the game. Up until then, the player might be playing the game like a classic boomer shooter, maybe occasionally tossing a coin or two. The V2 fight brings the difficulty at that stage up to 11, and almost forces you to play at a breakneck speed, switching weapons faster than you can breathe. The way V2 acts almost like a player feels like the game is goading you into playing faster, getting in closer for more blood, doing more damage, pressing more buttons. Unless you get the hang of this fast-paced combat, you'll be left in the dust by this boss fight. While both games are rooted in classic first-person shooters such as Doom and Quake, they are very opposing in a lot of ways. What I've discussed falls more under what the games added on top of these inspirations and how they adapt the formula to suit a modern game. Both succeeded on many fronts, and personally, this is the reason why they are two of my favourite games. Thanks for watching. I've linked both ULTRAKILL and Doom Eternal in the description, along with any links to any footage I used from either game. Comment letting me know what you think about ULTRAKILL and Doom Eternal. Thanks and goodbye.